Sound test, sound test. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Thank you, Katana.
Good. Yep. Mike is late too. Well,
Yes.
Yeah, but we're still in the prelude, so. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Cool. Early's good, Tim. What are you early for? Well, you're early for this interview with Steve Winter, which is awesome. So that's good.
Yep.
We're just waiting for Steve and Mike. So that's good to see you, man. Phantom, I will get you. I'll get you after the show on that VIP badge. Let's see. Don't forget start time next week. Ah. So, Tim, Finder made it to 7th. He's one of 3 characters that leveled from Thursday. So there you go. Here comes Mike. Oh, wow, it's out in PA. All right, well, cool. Still awaiting Steve and Winter here. But he has not messaged me that Fishy Music just followed. I'll have to shot that up. How you doing, Mike?
I'm not used to these early start times.
Yeah, on Sunday night.
But it's kind of good. Then I don't have to get that hungry in the evening, so it's kind of perfect for me.
Oh, that stinks, man. You got COVID.
Uh-oh.
Sorry to hear it. Well, sequestered. Hey, could be worse, right? What's up, Enoch? Alright, well, I'm waiting. all did a lot of, I'm assuming most of us, one way or another, did some running around or virtual calling or whatever for Mother's Day. So, same here. I feel good. I think we, when the Wolfgang was like 20 minutes late. I think that was the longest.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. Said he responded to my text yesterday with a thumbs up, so that's a goodie thing. Keeping my email up just for now, just in case. To this, and plus we got 8 minutes here till we're normally live.
That's good, Phantom. That's a good one. Yep.
Awesome. Tim, who was in the military too, would just flog you if you were late to a meeting, right, Tim? Trust me, this hurts you more than it hurts me. That's what he would always say, right, Tim? No. Hey, that's good. Mother's Day dinner, Curtis. Is it Mother's Day or Mothers-in-Law Day? My phone is on. Wow, 5:50 a.m. Damn. That's dedication, man. It's much appreciated. I hope we have 6:54. What's up, Landa? Finishing up this week. Something like. I will have. Let's see. Well, that's good to hear. He said we are awaiting our guest still, but hey, the show must go on.
Yep.
Hello. minutes here. Isn't it? Especially, like, you know, this stream. Just kidding. Just, you know, that's what happens. It's, you know, D&D, man. Our wonderful guest, Steve Winter, is not on yet, so sit tight. He did thumbs up me yesterday when I verified everything. Not sent me a message. I'm checking my email. I mean, via email and via text. No, like I said, we've had the longest. It was Wolfgang holds a record for being 20 minutes late.
Yep. It was a great show when he got here.
So when Steven comes on, though, 5 decades of work. From the 80s all the way to the 20s, right? 5 decades. It's pretty impressive. It's impressive.
I wonder what time zone it is in.
Seattle.
What's that?
I think he's in Seattle.
I think he's central.
Okay.
We got this guest is Stephen Winter's editor of the 1983 World Warehouse box set, and that was like the first thing he did.
What a start.
Yeah, what a start. So I'll give him. I won't message him till 7:05. I'll message him at 7:05 and say, hey, we're good. We're running. Is everything okay? And we'll go from there. Who's you got me there, man. You got me, David. I have no idea who you're no idea who you're talking about. Steve Spring. Who's that?
It's Pun.
What?
It's a pun.
Oh,
after Steve Winter, Steve Spring, and then Steve Summer.
Oh my God, David. I'm freaking old. Oh, look at that. Here he comes.
Perfect. Yep.
Very cool. Mike, I'm going to bottom shelf you. You're okay? Hello, Steve.
Knows the difference.
Yeah. Hello.
Steve.
We go to our main screen here, so we get off your highlighted entrance screen. Hello.
There we go.
Hello.
Welcome, Stephen.
Nice backdrop.
So, I'm Jay. My name's Jay Scott.
That's my office.
This is perfect.
Yeah, so cool.
Hey, everyone's used to the ever mysterious Tim with his weapon rack behind his head, and now we got some really cool guitars and some bass specter too. It's beautiful.
That's awesome.
I have a sheet, so.
Stephen, welcome. The community is really excited to have you on to chat. And we owe it to Mike below, Mike Bridges Girl Mike, who played in your game at GaryCon.
Yeah, I was in the D&D tournament at GaryCon.
Yes,
crazy killer pyramid thing.
We came in 5th place, I think it was 5th or 6th place.
Which, man, that shocked me because you guys, as I told you, I don't know if you heard, if you were part of the group the next day that I ran into, but
no,
because you guys actually, there was only one group that actually finished the whole thing, and you guys got farther than almost everybody else. I don't understand how everybody else outscored you, because I thought, other than the fact that, I mean, you made a couple of mistakes, obviously. But
well, we started getting to the point where we were running out of time, so we were tripping traps on purpose.
Yeah, but I mean, there were a lot of groups that didn't even make it past that crazy trapped hallway, you know, and you guys did way better than that, and like completely. The fact that when you were in a rush and everybody was running to complete, you like completely sidestepped a whole bunch of really nasty traps. So I was shocked that your team did not place higher. And as far as I know, I did the scoring the way I was supposed to. I don't know how the other teams scored better.
Better luck next time.
Yeah, but I mean, you weren't going to win anyway because somebody else actually went and fought the big bad and killed him. But yeah,
and Stephen, a lot of
proud of how well you did in that.
0 kill count.
A a lot of our community members, Curtis in particular, who's on watching right now, was part of the winning group. So you know, oh yeah, they were partying it up in the bar that night too. So
I'm sure. I mean, it's astounding that that anybody finished that thing in 4 hours, because they must have been just charging the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, welcome. I'm J.A.K. Lord Gazumba. My campaign goes back to 1980 in Greyhawk. I've been playing since '78, so 42-year continuous campaign. Anna B. Meyer, the great cartographer. I think you and Anna have hung out before. Right? Mm-hmm. Correct, Anna?
Yeah, I think up in Seattle with Wolfgang Bauer. I think we met once.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Greyhawk Mike Bridges. And so the community is still rolling in here. We usually have around 100 people watching, and there'll be some questions. I'm excited because I can't think of, like, you know, we have Ed come on, Ed Greenwood comes on a lot, but as far as with a Greyhawk background beginning, could you tell us a little bit, like, how you started in TSR and then what led up to the '83, you know, box set as far as editing goes?
Yeah, well, I mean, my story of how I started at TSR is kind of sadly mundane.
That's okay.
I graduated from Iowa State University in 1980. I had a degree in journalism, and I landed a job with the Peoria Journal-Star newspaper that year. But it was a temporary position. I was filling in for another reporter, a woman who was taking maternity leave to go have a baby and get you know, all the things that come along with that. So it was a 5-month hire, I believe, with the possibility to become, you know, a full-time reporter there if she chose to not come back to the job. But she did, which was fine. And so I suddenly found myself unemployed again. But I'd been playing D&D for years, and, you know, making a regular stop of the hobby shop there in Peoria. And I would, being a very poorly paid newspaper reporter, I would, you know, I tended to read Dragon magazine right there in the hobby shop rather than buying it and taking it back to my apartment. And there was an ad, I forget which issue of Dragon it was, but there was an ad in the back of the magazine just saying, hey, this is TSR. We're looking to hire an editor. If you're an editor and you're looking for work, send us a resume. So I did. And I got interviewed and I got hired. I mean, it was pretty much like any other job, right? There was a want ad, I answered it. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Illinois.
Where are you originally from?
I grew up in Dubuque, Iowa. So not that far from, you know, it was about a 2.5-3 hour drive to Lake Geneva. But I had the advantage that I was a professional. I mean, I had an actual degree in journalism, right? I was a writer and an editor. At the newspaper, I'd been a reporter, but when I was in college, I had been a copy editor on the college paper, which at Iowa State, the Iowa State Daily was actually one of the biggest daily newspapers in the state of Iowa. You know, so that was, you know, I had actual professional experience, and all the time I'd been a reporter, I'd been writing articles for, like, the Space Gamer on you know, doing game reviews and articles of Traveler, things like that. So
Traveler, cool.
Told, you know, after the whole interview process, which was an adventure in itself, Doug Bloom, who was the HR manager, the personnel manager at TSR at the time, told me I was the only. I mean, they had tons of applicants, obviously, because this ad ran in the Dragon. But I was pretty much the only person who applied who actually, like, tons of people had English degrees, but I was one of the few people who had actually had a journalism degree, had been working as a writer, had worked as an editor, had published gaming material, you know, so it was kind of a no-brainer from their end that I was the right fit for the job.
Wow.
So 22, 23 at the time?
Yeah, probably 23, I think. Yeah, 1980. Well, I went to work there in 81. So yeah, I would have been 23.
Wow.
Nice.
So They had you doing basic editing at first, you know, Dragon magazines, or you know.
The very first thing, the very first job they gave me, when I was applying as an editor, they gave me an editing test, and it was like 2 pages of a piece of an adventure that I had never seen. They said that it was a manuscript they'd received, and they wanted to know what I would do with it. So they gave me these 2 pages, and I took it back home, and this was all pre-word processing software, right? This was a printout. And I mean, I literally cut it up with scissors and re-taped it together, and, you know, red lines all over it. And when I sent it back, I told them, you know, in my opinion, what this needs is to be sent back to the author for a rewrite. This does not need to be edited at this point. It needs to be rewritten from scratch. And then they hired me. And then what did they do for my first job? They gave me that manuscript and said, edit this.
You want it, you got it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it turned out to be Secret of Bone Hill. It was
Leonard's.
Yeah.
What?
Whoa.
So I gotta ask.
Now you got his attention.
So Stephen, Leonard was on about 40 times before he passed on our shows. And Leonard would just show up, talk for about 30 minutes, and just disappear. And it was great.
he just disconnected.
Yeah, it was awesome. Leonard, are you the editor? Leonard goes, those damn editors, they rewrite everything. I remember all the time. He would always say that.
Probably, I really gave the Bone Hill got a real working over when it on my desk. I was
wow,
full of myself, and yeah.
But
probably. I never actually met Len. I heard a lot of stories about it, but I never.
He was so hysterical on he was a wealth of knowledge. We found out a lot, and so when we do these discussions, we always find out 1 or 2 things that just like we found out from Jim Ward on the show that Gary Gygax coined Monty Hall DM about him. And like so you find out these really neat tidbits. And we found that out as well with
nothing is too mundane for us.
Yes, like we found out that Leonard wrote Nystel's Magic Aura, which we didn't know. That he said that he wrote it for the Nystel family. So maybe we'll find out a couple little tidbits tonight, which would be really cool. Yeah. Absolutely. So Bone Hill was the first one, L1. Wow, that is cool.
Iconic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And then. I think monster cards were one of the second things. They were the second or third thing they gave me. I didn't even have an office yet at that time when they gave me some of those things. And the monster cards, I don't know if you remember those.
Yep, absolutely.
I was, honestly, I seriously considered quitting at that point.
Oh my.
Because I was I just thought that was I loved the idea of the monster cards, but the format that they landed on was terrible. And, no one, there was nothing that could be done about it at that point, right? We were stuck with that format because that is what had been told to distributors it would be, and that was what it had been priced out with at the printer, right? But they were these, they were tall and skinny. There wasn't nearly enough space to actually, they want you to take a vampire and explain how it works in, the size of 2 postage stamps by the time you've got all the stats on the card. And it was, frankly, it was just impossible in a lot of cases, right? And again, when you're 23,
yeah.
Things like that are huge on your horizon, right? It's like, how can I have my name associated with these monsters? This will tarnish me for the rest of my life.
But eventually, 83 comes around, and Gary, someone says, "We want you. We're going to redo the glossography." So we have the original glossography from 80.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then so they decide we're going to add deities, we're going to add a whole bunch of other things to the World of Greyhawk box set, right. And you get the gig to be the editor. So How'd that come about?
Surely it wasn't from Monster Cards.
Yes.
No. I had worked on quite a few other kind of high-profile things. I had done Star Frontiers already at that point. I was the main editor on Star Frontiers. I was the main editor on Gangbusters. I mean, almost like not from the very beginning, but because there were some other really good editors there, right? John Pickens was in the department at that time. Nobody knew AD&D. Honestly, I was kind of surprised that I think Troy Denning is the one who assigned me to Greyhawk. And I suspect that maybe Troy gave it to me rather than somebody like John, who was, much more steeped in everything AD&D. Perhaps because he knew that I would not just roll over and do whatever Gary said the way some other people might have. That I think Troy had kind of looked at the manuscript and realized there's got to be some pushback here, and we need an editor who isn't afraid to, or afraid's the wrong word, but Gary was a huge personality, and he loomed over things like this. And, being willing to push back against that monolith was just not something that everybody in the department was going to be good at, I guess. So
I'm assuming this was the monstrosity of the undertaking for 1983 was to get this out. Is that correct, or was it?
I think. I mean, that's a tough question. To some extent, I think there were a lot of people who looked at that and figured, this is Gary's baby. We're just going to publish what Gary gives us.
Yeah. Well, was it a long-term looming coming project that was working on for years, or was it just something that was kind of put in and say, okay, now we're going to do it? And was it?
I couldn't really answer that. I'm not sure. Mainly because I just don't remember.
Okay.
This was,
we're talking about
40 years ago, right? I mean, I think we knew it was coming because we knew the schedule often a year in advance. But it also was not uncommon for Gary to come along and just kind of plunk things in, sort of at the spur of the moment. A project like this can really go two ways, right? It's like I say, on the one hand, it's Gary's material, so there's a certain hands-off, right? We're gonna do what Gary wants because it's his game, right? He's the man behind this, and it's not really, none of us are in a position to second guess Gary. But at the same time, there are very real considerations in terms of publishing. Like it's got to match a page count. It has to, users have to be able to use this product. They have to be able to understand it when they read it and make sense out of it. And it needs to be referenceable at the table, right? That was actually that was probably the other reason why Troy plunked this on my desk, was because I was very much, my focus was all on, this has got to be friendly to the DM. If the DM can't pick this up and find what he's looking for quickly, then it's not doing its job. So, I mean, I think, as I vaguely recall that I don't even have a copy of this anymore, so I couldn't go back and look at it. As I recall, it has a pretty significant index in it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I spent at least 2 or 3 days just on that index, after everything else was done. So
you have an index of the cities in the back here, for instance, and let's see what.
Lots of indexes.
There's not like one master. There's not one master index. There are like several different for different things. So yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So listen, we may ask a couple questions that are detailed, and if you don't know, it's no big deal.
Oh
Really.
yeah,
it's not.
yeah.
But
We just
the community's like, please ask this.
I know. There's a joke that it went around TSR. I'm sure it never really made it much outside the company. You probably all heard of Ken Ralston. Ken worked for West End Games, a brilliant game designer. And he did something for us. I forget which project it was, but Ken did some freelance work for us. And he was asking us questions about it. Oh, I think it was, he wrote some of the D&D Gazetteers.
Okay.
And he was asking us questions about it. And our response was, I don't know. We haven't thought about it. That's why we're hiring you, right? You think about it. You answer those questions. And Ken wrote us a letter back saying, no, we must have dogma.
That's funny.
That's amazing that someone had to.
He was channeling all the fans.
Yeah. It's kind of funny when someone has to argue for it. Now we have, meaning D&D steeped in it, decades of it now. So now it's trying to dig their way out of old dogma, so to speak. I'm curious, when this came around, was there things that had to be cut, meaning you had a format, was these many pages and so on and so forth? Were there things that you had to kind of put on the side and that never got published, that kind of had to be cut away? Do you know any parts that we never saw, so to speak?
Yeah, I can't imagine that there were not things like that. I could not begin to tell you at this point what they were.
Yeah.
I will say that when it originally landed on my desk, it was all one book. The notion of splitting it into two different books, that one came from me. That was what I insisted on.
Cool.
Because there were clearly two completely different kinds of information in this thing, right? There's all the stuff about the country, all the various nations, and then there's all this other weird color, about the trees, and things like that. And I was like, I don't see how I can make this work as one book, right? And it was actually that was quite a battle. Fortunately, it was not one that I particularly had to wage. All I had to do was persuade Troy that this was a battle we needed to win. And then Troy went and fought that one, because the main people he was arguing it with were the folks down in the purchasing department, who were the ones who, bought all the paper and all the print time and priced everything out. And, it's like, well, if we're going to have two books going through a binding process instead of one, right, like two saddle stitched books instead of one perfect bound book, this kind of changes everything from their perspective. So it was a fight that had to be waged. I don't recall Gary having any particular objection. I do remember I wrote like a 1 or 2 page letter to Gary explaining why I wanted to do this, and got just a very brief note back from him saying, essentially, sounds good to me. Go ahead.
That's good.
Yeah.
Was it your call to make it a box set?
No, it was always going to be a box.
Mm-hmm.
So that was not an issue.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because what we ended up with was one book here with a lot of the literary, meaning descriptions and all that, and then the glossography that has the game technical stuff, meaning the tables, the rollable stuff, the stat blocks for the deities and stuff that have game mechanics and stuff ended up in this book, and all the other stuff that you can basically just sit and read without and just descriptions and stuff. And I kind of like that bit that you put the game mechanics and all that stuff in a separate booklet.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
So the number one question everyone asks, and I know at this under in the glossography we have the foreword, and it says at the very end, it says Steve Witter, editor, Alan Hammock, product planning manager, and it's the Pluffett Savant Sage Pluffett Smedger letter, and the very last paragraph is basically the make Greyhawk your own paragraph. you know, where it says, you could now mold from states of old or inflame ancient rivalries and open warfare as you tailor the world to suit your needs of your players as it goes on. Who is the author of that?
That's one of those I honestly don't remember.
It's so cool because it's one of the most cited parts of the Greyhawk.
Yes. Okay. That's an honest answer is a good one because
it's so cool that has made it into it. And people
I
in
would
community.
I would love to say that was all me, but I honestly don't remember.
So it could be Alan, Gary. It could be
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I suspect that there's probably a little bit of all three of us in there.
Yeah, David says it's Hammock, but Alan Hammock didn't take credit for it when he was on the show, David. So about a year ago. So
Alan's a very, very humble guy.
Yeah, a very nice guy.
Yeah, so good because that has become a motto in the Greyhawk community now that you're supposed to because it's written in the original books. Yeah.
Robert Hartley's coming in. We got a mega raid in. So
I mean, there was a big flap for years about, you know, because that used to be the message on D&D itself, right? It was take this game and do whatever you want with it. And then Gary kind of went through a phase where he was writing in Dragon and saying, you know, if you're not playing by the rules as written, you're not really playing AD&D. And it, you know, that kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. But I don't think he was ever had the same amount of kind of possessive feel over Greyhawk that he did over AD&D.
Thank you, Robert.
That's interesting because the Greyhawk setting was in a way maybe even more personal. I get the sense that than the game rules, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're absolutely right about that. But at the same time, I feel like I got the impression that he was much more open to, you know, do what you want with this. Right? I've given it to you. Now, you know, take this and make it your own. You know, and some of that is practical, right? Because like Gen Con was getting to be a much bigger thing by the early 80s. And if you had people coming to the convention and everyone is playing a different version of AD&D, that makes things very difficult for the team. If everybody's playing a different version of Greyhawk, that's just kind of cool, right? But if my paladin doesn't line up with your paladin in key ways, that makes it, you know. And the thing, and I'm sure probably a lot of you, several of you at least remember, and certainly a lot of your listening audience here or watching audience will remember how at conventions at that time, open gaming was a much bigger deal than it is now, right? Now you go to a convention and it's all scheduled events and there's very little open gaming, right? But in the late 70s, early 80s, it was all about, you know, you'd have a small area over here for scheduled events and then a great big hall for open gaming that was just, you know, DMs show up with their dungeon and players show up with their characters and you put up a sign saying, you know, level 7 and above, right?
Yeah.
There was a little bit of that at Gary Con, right? Yeah. Mike, you opened game to game, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I played in one.
That was cool about Gary Con, Stephen. They had those tables out, and the one gentleman who's always there, who's got the hobby store, he was sitting there just doing it. He did like 12 hours a day, which is cool. But you're right, it's nowhere near as big as it was.
But you're so true with the rules, because that's something now when we have organized play, both from a lot of game companies now have organized play leagues where people play, and that has really put down that you have to have common rules and common interpretations of the rules and stuff. So I guess, but this was back in those days, there were no organized play in the modern sense, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. And you know, I mean, the rules of AD&D themselves are just so open to interpretation in a lot of cases that, you know, people can very honestly come to the table with differences in their characters. And if you encourage that sort of thing, then, you know, if you really throw the doors open, you know, that's the other thing. I've had this conversation with friends and not friends about you know, when the OSR was really catching on, and then when the whole, you know, one true religion idea started to infect the OSR, right? Where it's, well, you've got, if you're not playing this game, then you're not really playing the OSR kind of thing. And I would try to tell them, you know, in 1978, we sat down at the table, we had the 3 little books, we had the monster manual, we had stuff from Judges Guild, we had stuff from, you know, all the various California publishers, we had fanzines, we had Arduin Grimoire, we had Chivalry and Sorcery and RuneQuest. All these things were on the table at the same time. And we were playing D&D, right? But what we were playing was not recognizable as any of those games. It was a mishmash of everything. We were just taking ideas from everywhere and playing whatever worked at our table. And so was everybody else.
Yeah.
So there was no one true OSR. There was no one true game. Everybody was, you know.
Every DM's different. Every single DM. I agree 100% with that. Definitely, Stephen. So we're giving away a couple things tonight, just so you know, the audience is participating in. And Treasures Grail and your Temple Tower and Tomb in reprint. So yeah, we're going to do 2 sets. Okay, I got 2 of them. So please sign up. We'll do it at the end of the night. We'll get to the questions on this one too. You know, so when I went through everything, I was like, oh my gosh, man, I did not realize how much you've participated.
I don't know if you know that that's on the cover of Temple Tower and Tomb. That's Jeff Grubb and Anne Gray, I think, were the
oh, really?
Oh, for those 2 characters.
That's Jeff Grubb. Okay, so that's Jeff.
Guy,
Jeff.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Easter egg.
Yeah, that is so cool.
Did not know that. That is really cool to know. Wow, that's great. So I know I'm compiling questions here. I have one from Puffett Smedger himself, Gary Julian, who wrote the Living Grail Gazetteer, one of the ones who wrote the Living Grail Gazetteer 3rd edition. And his and that is, and if you don't know, it's okay, absolutely. I know a lot of the passages of Slaratin, the Lawara, which is the Lost Tribe, right, of the Suwis, and the Mother. Any idea whose information that was? No, okay. Len kind of claimed it, but we weren't sure 100%. Oh. Right? Okay. Because with Leonard, we never knew.
I mean, at the time, I was not particularly concerned with the the provenance of anything. If it was in Gary's manuscript, it went into the book.
Okay. So. That's perfectly fine. I just I'm asking the questions. I just wanted to. So another thing was you did Star Frontiers before, which I did not know, the 83 box set. Do you have a preference over sci-fi over D&D fantasy, or is it you like both?
Well, in terms of role-playing games, I would go with fantasy generally over science fiction. In terms of fiction, right? If I'm sitting down to read a book, I would much rather read science fiction than fantasy. And I mean, that's A, because I just find it more interesting. B, because I find it's not so much that science fiction in general is so much better written than fantasy, but there's a huge amount of fantasy out there that is just really, really badly written. So it's if you pick any random science fiction book off the out of the used bookstore and any random fantasy novel out of the used bookstore, odds are the SF novel is going to be better written and a more enjoyable read.
Someone just asked about your Telecaster, what year it is.
This one here, it's a 2012 American Standard.
There you go. Very cool. Playing the bands?
No. I should. I've been thinking I've got to start looking around for some local jam nights.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of stuff all really took a hit over the last 3 years. Right. So
yes. Understand on the investments. Man, it's been a bad year. another topic for another night. So after 83, I'm assuming you're doing a lot of major projects, and then at some point you decide, I'm going to start writing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think when the first project I wrote. I think the first thing I wrote for TSR, other than some articles for the magazine, I did I think the Psionics Handbook.
Yes, complete Psionics Handbook. I don't have that.
That was a thing because I think nobody else wanted to do it.
It's always been contentious and
there it is.
Psionics in D&D.
I feel that.
All right, so that was your first. Very cool.
And I had a huge amount of fun writing that. And as you say, it was when it came out. I mean, the reviews were all over the place, right? It was like we had one group of people saying, "This is the worst approach to psionics ever." You had another group of people saying, "This is the best approach to psionics ever," and another group saying, "You know, that's so underpowered." Another group saying, it's so overpowered." And so it kind of felt like it kind of sounds like we hit it right about where we wanted to hit it. But it was a big departure from what it had been before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know personally that's the only era of psionics rules that my game ever used.
Oh, really?
To this day, I still don't understand AD&D psionics.
No, that was so badly written, and it had nothing to do with D&D. It was a completely different systems with that had nothing to do with the rest of the game. So we just simply discarded that, but never used it.
I did get I got an interesting letter from a fan after that book came out. I really steeped myself in a lot of different sources at the time. I know I had borrowed some books from Zeb Cook and on various forms of mysticism, and also from Karen Boomgarden. She had a lot of good source material on that. And so I was reading a lot of, things on Eastern mysticism and Zen and, scientific analyses of ESP and things like that. But I got a letter from someone after it had come out saying, you really seem to have drilled in on the aspects of psychic activity that truly make it function. Are you psychic yourself?
That's awesome.
No, sorry. I really just kind of made it all up after I read some books.
So David Leonard is asking me a question that I don't understand, and I'm going to ask it to you there, Stephen, and that is about Greg Krondex 42. What is that, David? It said something about planning. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Greg, yes,
Me neither.
Greg Krondex 42. I guess it's how you planned out the timelines for Greyhawk and
It
publications.
might have been one of those fanzines or.
Was it David? Tell us what it is, David.
That doesn't ring a bell.
There you go, David. Shot down on that one. So let me know what you elaborate a little bit more on that, please, for me. It's the compiled timeline indexed for Greyhawk. Okay, I don't know who did that. Someone there responsible for compiling what's going on in all the publications for Forgotten Realms and Greyhawk and Dragonlance at the time, or how was that handled? Do you know?
At that time, no. There was, that's an issue. I know when I was at Wizards of the Coast 10 years ago in the early 2000s, there actually was a guy on staff who, for part of that time at least, whose job was essentially much like computer game companies, right? Like if you go to Elder Scrolls Online or something, where they have a lore master, someone whose job it is specifically to keep track of all the lore and make sure that it's internally consistent as much as it needs to be. TSR never had anyone in that role, at least not formally. There certainly were people who kind of took it on themselves, right? I mean, and definitely within Forgotten Realms, there were people like Steve Shen and Karen Boomgarden, and some other people on that product team who were very conversant with the timelines and the lore, and they kept it all straight. But they sort of did that. I mean, they did it because they enjoyed it, but they also did it as kind of a survival mechanism, or within their job, right? If they're going to be working on that material, they needed that information. But no one was was like formally assigned and told, this is part of your job, and you will set aside part of your week to deal with this, right? It was more editing this 300-page manuscript is your job, and if you need to keep track of some of that other stuff in order to make it happen, then make it happen, right?
Okay.
So, and I guess where I was going with that is that that's part of how, in a publishing enterprise like TSR or Wizards of the Coast or any company, I know I saw you had like Scarlet Citadel, Kobold Press with Midgard, any company that has an expansive campaign setting, the lore is just going to pile up and pile up and pile up, and eventually it's going to overwhelm you. And there's a certain body of fans who just really dig that, and they eat it up with a spoon, and the, you know, you cannot have too much lore, right? We want the dogma,
yeah,
right? That crowd, and you know, God bless them, but they're it reaches a point where it works very strongly against you commercially, because new customers cannot get into that, right? They go into the store and they're like, I've heard about this thing called Forgotten Realms, and they look on the rack and there are 50 Forgotten Realms products, and none of them are the basic campaign set, right?
Yep.
So,
yeah.
So they just put their wallet back in their pocket and they walk out of the store. I know, you know, I'm kind of, I think I probably drifted away from what the question was.
No, it's great. No, it's fantastic.
You know, these are, I mean,
yeah, it's great. Absolutely.
That's kind of, you know, that's part of why games get reset, why you get new editions of games, and it's why you get new editions of campaign settings, because they ultimately get to a point where they are eating their own guts, and you know, they're not going to survive if you don't, you know, not necessarily wipe the table clean, but you've got to clear away the grime and, you know, get this to the point where new players can come in. And
yeah, I was thinking back in the early days of TSR, when Gary started, he was the kind of the lore master, and especially on Greyhawk, I think it was his setting. Did that must have changed profoundly when he was no longer part of the company, and therefore the ultimate authority, so to speak, on matters, especially when it comes to Greyhawk and the stuff that he wrote personally. Then he was no longer there. Was that kind of a relief that you can all of a sudden you can kind of go on in tangents where you wanted to go, so to speak, or how did that?
Well, except, I mean, I think the answer would be yes, if the company had really continued to support Greyhawk at that
well,
point.
That's true. Yeah, you abandoned Greyhawk when he was no longer with the company. It was natural to.
Yeah, once Gary was gone, and you know, I was not privy to any of those conversations, so I can't really speak to them. I suspect, though, you know, the kind of the wisdom within the company was part of what pushed us to doing Forgotten Realms was obviously there's a demand for a product like Greyhawk. There is a reluctance on the part of company management to make Greyhawk a really big thing, because it has Gary's name on it, and I suspect, you know, there were royalties involved, right? And so
he could just be there commenting on the sidelines, like I wouldn't do this or something like that. So
right, and there's the very much the potential for, since you know Gary obviously did not leave the company voluntarily, and that was not a good parting. It would have been very easy, you know, for him to make comments, you know, into the commercial public out there that would have torpedoed a product like that. So, you know, it was kind of natural to steer away from that and come up with something new, and had been working on Forgotten Realms for years at that point, and TSR owned a lot of it. So but obviously, we did go back to Greyhawk then later on. In the late 80s. And
Free City Greyhawk box set is my favorite publication of all time. Absolutely. We just had Rick Rose on you know, who did one of the books with Carl Sargent. It was a fantastic discussion. You did this too. I know it's like the name is not PC for today, but you were one of the editors on the Oriental Adventures book. I mean, look, this is fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I still got the Toys R Us logo on it. Yeah.
Oh, that was a tremendously enjoyable product to work on. That was Zeb and my first big collaboration before we worked on second edition.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, a lot of what's in OA was sort of testing the waters for ideas that we wanted to bake into second edition.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a lot of mechanics advancement in Oriental Adventures. And yeah, exactly. There was a lot of concept and stuff. So even if I never ran an Oriental campaign, I was really interested in, because we were starved for new kind of game mechanics and to expand the game at that time. Meaning Unearthed Arcana took forever to come out, and Oriental Adventures was one of the few that came at that time, and it had a lot of interesting, cool concepts, and was, to my, even if it's weird, I love the book, even if I never used it as intended, because I never ran an Oriental campaign. But when it comes to first edition AD&D material, I think it's one of the best ever done, because it was so thoroughly done, and it was also reflected back on the game in interesting ways that other books haven't done, so to speak. It was kind of, yeah, like you said, it was a precursor to second edition.
And second edition, you know, I'm a 1E, 2E player to this day still. And, you know, I know there was the Splat books, there was, so many books all over the place. And for the normal kid, it was tough. But they're just gold now. I mean, so I want to show you this, because this is one of these books are like, they're so expensive now. I got all 6 of them. You wrote this, the Mighty Fortress book, right? The campaign source book. And the the map inside is like a map of it's a Holy Roman Empire era Europe map, which is really neat. So you got France, and you got the Holy Roman Empire, you know, so you got that era, which is really cool. Was this based on something you were doing in your own campaign, or you know, when you came up with the idea for one of these? You got the Celts, Romans, all those era books, the Vikings,
well, you know, I was head of the AD&D product group at that time, and we always had to do these product schedules, like year-long product schedules. We had to plan everything out, and there was always a lot of gnashing of teeth over, you know, what can we do that hasn't been done before and that will sell. And one of the big things that we were always wrestling with is that it's very easy to do products aimed at DMs. It's very hard to do products aimed at players, but obviously things aimed at players are going to sell way better than things aimed at DMs, because there are just so many more players to begin with.
Yeah.
So a product like that, you know, a source book that everybody wants. If you're going to sit down and play in that setting, DMs and players will benefit from having that book. They don't necessarily, you don't need to have one for everybody at the table, but you know, everyone can benefit from having it. So, and we hit on the historical thing simply because an awful lot of us at TSR were big history buffs. We were war gamers. You know, we just were really into that kind of thing. And
it's cool.
That was a little bit of a vanity project. I mean, that was my pet project. The whole line, the green leatherette books.
It was so good. The Celts, the Vikings and stuff. They're fantastic.
They're awesome now, but I can see how back then they were like they were a vanity item for during that era.
It was a little bit of a hard sell to the company, but you know, we needed to fill out the schedule, and we promised them that they would be well done, and people we knew they weren't going to sell as well as, you know, a book about, you know,
but that whole
or something, right? But we figured that if they were well done and we had good fold out maps in them, and you know, that they would do well enough, and they definitely did that.
Yeah, and also I love the production values. You had the brown line for the player mechanic stuff and so on, and then you had the blue line for the DM stuff, and the green for like campaign extras, background books and stuff. And I loved both the format and how they were done when it comes to production values and stuff. They were really ahead of their time, and they were not very elaborate, but they were very beautiful and wonderful. So they were simple but beautiful, and I kind of like that concept.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing was, the reason, a big part of why we settled on that format was because it was inexpensive. The leatherette covers didn't cost a lot, and because there was just a symbolic thing on the cover. It wasn't a full colored painting. Well, so that made it was a lot cheaper to put a cover on the book.
Yeah, I'm going to get one of each to show the viewers what we're talking about.
How long did it take to do one of those green books?
Our rule of thumb was 1 month for every 32 pages, and I think those are 128 pages.
This one's 96. So.
Okay, I was saying either 96 or 128.
Yeah.
So it would have been, we would have allotted 3 months to someone.
It's quick.
Yeah. So here we have a player's version.
Yeah.
The Humanoid's Handbook, and then we have the DM's Blue series. I'm sorry they're a bit reflective because I put plastic wrapping on them so they will last forever.
Yeah, and I had forgotten the players and DM's books.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases,
and then these green ones that were the background stories and stuff. So and they're all fantastic, and they often came with these beautiful maps and inlets and stuff. So they're some of the best.
Wow, that one fell apart, Mike.
Yeah. And some of these are really good, like there is the monster mythology, for instance. That one is, if you're at least bit interested in Greyhawk and stuff, that one is still gold standard even today.
Complete book of necromancers for me.
There's several of them that are just fantastically good books.
I think I figured this connection out, Stephen, down the road. So we know, and we'll get there, that you were part of Ghost of Saltmarsh in 2019, but you also were editor for this, which kind of is verbatim in Ghost of Saltmarsh of Ships in the Sea. Right.
Yeah.
So you're the editor for this. This is a good book.
That was again. That was one that I came up with the title for it when we were doing all of our product planning, and I believe Skip Williams wrote that.
Keith Francis Strom. It says.
Oh, Keith. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I thought. All right. I'll take that. Yeah, Keith was another guy on my product team. He was kind of my number 2 guy in terms of administrative stuff for quite a while, and. Generally an editor, but so he tackled that one. Yeah, that was I think we did a lot of good work. I mean, I think some of those splat books got excessive, but the DM's books, well, as you say, a lot of those were gold.
Well, yeah, they're fantastic. They're some of the best written for D&D since, and they've been rewritten in newer versions, in 3rd edition and 5th edition and stuff. And if you go back to the originals, if you have them, you're already covered, except for the game mechanics explicitly. But all the backstories, the information, the creativity and stuff was founded in those books to a large degree, and it's amazing.
And if you go in the back of this book, the appendix is titled "Of Ships in the Sea."
Yeah,
and it's almost identical. So it must have been a good book back then if they almost completely copied verbatim in Ghost of Saltmarsh, which is a cool thing. So I love this.
I worked on the Ghosts of Saltmarsh book along with Wolf, and unfortunately, I still don't have a copy of it.
What? I have a copy sitting here, but yeah.
I mean, it's an amusing reason why. The Wizards of the Coast sent copies to Wolf because they had contracted with Kobold Publishing to do the work. And so rather than sending me a copy and sending Wolf a copy, they just sent the copies to Wolf. And I've since, I've sat down, I've met Wolf for coffee and lunch and, various things 12 times at least since then. And every time it's always like, oh, I forgot to bring your copy. It's still sitting.
He's sitting in his
box at Wolf's house somewhere. Yep. And eventually one of these years I'll get my copy.
One day. So
he has
yeah,
so many things on his plate, so he's late in things at
Yeah.
times. So yeah.
Yes, Wolfgang was has the record for being the latest to show up for his time on the show here, so he still holds that record. So
he was 20 minutes late.
Yeah.
So
and I'll have to. I'll go. I've told other people this story, but I'll share it with you.
Please.
And on the original work that I did on Saltmarsh, that was one of the UK modules, and so it landed on my desk, and I believe Don Turnbull wrote that, and I went through and edited it. And one of the things I did, and no one told me one way or another how to handle this, so I just corrected all their British spelling. I mean, I knew that it had been written in the UK, but my perspective on it was, we're going to sell 10 times as many of these in the US as get sold in the UK. So I'm going to change these things to US spelling. And there were a lot of other things that I fixed as well.
Would have never occurred to me.
So
well, and at some point, this was still in the days of what we called pre-press, where we would send text to the typesetters. They would print it off in just one big long sheet of type, and that would have to be physically cut apart with X-Acto knives and pasted down on boards.
Oh my gosh!
Layout, which were then photographed and turned into printing plates. And that work was all done in a department called pre-press. And I had gone down to pre-press for something or other. I don't know why. I mean, we went down there a lot. And there was Don Turnbull, right? And the Saltmarsh module was, it had been through typesetting, it had been through layout. I had done all my corrections on it. As far as I was concerned, that was done. It was leaving the building. And I go down, and there's Don going over the final boards with, a pen and an X-Acto knife and one of the people from pre-press, and he's making changes. And Don, I should say, Don lived in the UK. He just happened to be in the US. He had come over for some sort of consultation, business consultation.
Oh man.
And I walked over and I was like, what is going on here? Why is this happening? And Don Turnbull, and I didn't really know who Don Turnbull was at the time. I did not fully appreciate his history in the hobby of wargaming and role-playing games. I only learned after this happened. I probably would have behaved a little differently if I had done it at the time. But again, I was 21, 20, I like 23, 24. And
so awesome.
And I kind of started chewing him out. I was like, what the hell's going on here? And Don is saying, you changed all these, you changed all these spellings, you changed all these words choices, you changed all these sentence structures. I want this all put back the way it was. I was like, it is way too late in the process for this to be happening. And A, and B, the changes I made were all good changes, and there's no reason to be altering them at this point. And he starts going off on this thing about, this was written in a, British English as opposed to American English, and it should have stayed that way. And I made some crack about, well, maybe, it just looked to me like it was poorly written. Maybe I'm not as familiar with British English as you are. And he says, well, read some Shakespeare. I've read Shakespeare.
Oh.
This is not Shakespeare.
Wow, that was funny.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he stormed out, and like half an hour later, I was visited by, who was it? I forget who it was who came to my office. It was either Dave Sutherland or Will Niebling or somebody, a vice president, right, saying,
The Queen.
you really can't talk to Don Turnbull that way.
So when they went
to say, Don got all his changes made. So
it went back to British English, so to speak, in the module.
And all the UK's.
Yes, that's why it's
they all
so
stay that way.
Shakespearean.
Yeah.
If you read
Beyond Beyond the Crystal Cave, Sentinel Gauntlet, all those stayed that way too, I'm assuming at that point.
So Steve Sullivan, a very good buddy, Steve Sullivan, who worked downstairs in the art department at that time. And of course, this story, it just raced through the building as to what had happened down in pre-press. And I still have these things somewhere in my files. Steve drew this lovely little set of translucent pixie wings on a piece of parchment, right? And cut them out and brought them up and pinned them on the wall of my office above my desk with a little sign that said, pixie wings to be used when dusting British manuscripts.
Oh, that's so cute.
That is awesome.
Yeah, so that hung on my
wall. You had the rivalry between the UK guys and the US. That's pretty cool.
I am forever going to
call it a rivalry, but it was.
I'm forever going to associate Saltmarsh with Shakespeare now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah.
So 1994. We already showed this. You write this jointly with. I apologize for not remembering her name. My apologies. It's good. It's good. It's high level too. It's level 7 to 12. Mm-hmm. Laura Craig, right?
Yes.
Yes. This is the era of the black border, neutrally placed adventures. There's a lot of them that come out, like Forge of, I have Forge of Figures 3rd edition, but there was a lot of those 2nd edition books, Sea Devils, all that were all just, all the Beholder books, they were all in that neutrally placed. So I'm assuming
Tyrant, which is like the best title that TSR ever had.
Yeah, and they're good books too. They're really good books. What was the thought behind this? Did they say come to us with a project? We want an adventure, or
it was an experiment. That was, again, I was the product group leader on that, and that one was my idea, because I really liked short adventures, and we didn't really have. I don't recall if we were publishing Dungeon magazine yet at that time or not.
I think so. I think you were 94. Yeah, I think it was out.
Yeah, we may have had an outlet for short adventures then. But there was nothing other than that. There was nothing on the store shelf that was just short adventures. And I was reading a lot of Clark Ashton Smith kind of fiction at that time. And there was an exhibit at the Milwaukee Public Museum called Tell and Tomb or something like that. A tell is a kind of ancient burial site.
Play on words. Yep.
Yes, and I would take my kids up there. We all loved that portion of the museum, and so that was where the title came from. We just thought, let's do some short adventures and see how it does. Right? It was publishing was obviously kind of a different thing. Pre-Kickstarter, you didn't know what the demand was.
True. Yeah.
Until you published it. You put it in the store to see how many people buy it. So if you wanted to know if there was a market for short adventures like that, you ran a test. You published some short adventures and see if people bought them. We didn't do any other products like that, so obviously that one did not sell all that well.
Yeah.
But
Swamp Light came out at that time too, right? That was another one that was similar to the Black Border, and there was one or two other ones. But Wand of Arkiel, or was that an RPGA one? I always get them all confused. But there were some.
That must have been RPG.
Yeah, I think it was. But there was some. That era, there was so much content coming out. You had box sets. I know Skip was highly involved. You had Return to the Tomb of Horrors. You had the Rod of Seven Parts box set. You had all these box sets coming out that time. So, which was neat. So that era kind of transitions into 3rd edition era, Living Greyhawk era, and Paizo Hawk era, right?
Mm-hmm.
When WotC buys the company.
No.
Okay.
When Wizards, I wanted to, but there were, my wife at the time and I had just finished like multi-year remodeling project on this beautiful Victorian house.
Oh no.
In southeast Wisconsin. And then suddenly Wizards of the Coast buys the company and wants to move everyone out to Seattle. No. And it's like, we've been living in, construction hell for 3 years, and we finally get a chance to enjoy this beautiful home that we've built, and we have to leave it. So we were not willing to leave just yet. My wife at the time was Mary Kirchhoff, and she was running the book department, the book publishing department. And the company Wizards was willing to let her continue doing what she was doing remotely, more or less. She had to spend 2 weeks out of every 5 out in Seattle. They offered me the job of running R&D, but they would not, that was not something that I could do remotely. So if I took that job, we had to move out. And so as long as they were willing to keep her employed, and, I knew I could find all the freelance work I wanted if I left. So I turned them down. She kept working remotely. And of course, 4 years later, we wound up out in Seattle anyway. So, but we did get to enjoy the house
for some years. Yep.
Yeah, it was a beautiful house. I still
okay.
And now 20 years later, you can do that stuff remotely.
Yeah.
Just the ironies. Yep. All right. So for 4 years, that downtime, what happened in those time frames? Did you do freelance work or?
Yeah, I did a lot of freelance work, not just D&D things. I worked on quite a few different card games. I worked on a Dragon Ball Z card game with Jim Ward. Some other, I forget what else. I mean, a bunch of different things. Kind of an Immortals kind of RPG about, sort of a Highlander kind of thing, right? With these immortal beings who fight each other. Yeah, it was not a great game, but
still, I never knew it existed.
Yeah, I forget what all else. I edited the official D&D movie book that came out at the same time as that first D&D movie. A bunch of different things, and I got to be a house dad, and when my kids were in grade school, which was got to go on school, be a chaperone dad on school field trips and things like that. So those were good years.
So speaking of Jim Ward, someone asked you ever play Metamorphosis Alpha with him?
I've never played MA with Jim. I have played Gamma World with Jim.
Oh, there you go.
I was about to say the follow-up on that would be, did you have time for gaming?
Yes, exactly. With everything going on.
Yeah.
They all gamed.
So right? I'll tell you funny Jim. Everybody who's played Gamma World with Jim has a funny Gamma World with Jim story. But we were playing. Jim wanted to play some Gamma World, and this was in the early 80s. And so he just put up a note in the offices saying, "Hey, I'm going to run some Gamma World in the basement of the Dungeon Hobby Shop on Saturday if anybody wants to play." So I showed up, and Neil Christensen was a guy who worked at TSR, worked at the hobby shop, I think. And somebody else, there was a third person, but maybe Jeff Leeson. And playing Gamma World, right? My character was some kind of mutated raccoon or something. And the concept. Yeah. And we find an artifact. And so we have to figure out what it does. And Jim doesn't use those little tables in the book much. He just makes it goof around with it until you figure it out. So I say, all right, I'm going to take this thing. I'm going to take it over behind that big rock over there, and I'm going to start messing with it. And everybody else is, hiding on the other side of the rock. And we figure they'll be safe. And so I'm goofing around. Jim says, all right, you play with it. And a beam of radiation shoots out of it and melts your face. And I say, but Jim, I'm immune to radiation. It says so right here on my character sheet. And Jim gets this sour look on his face. And he turns to Neil Christensen and he says, okay, a beam of radiation shoots out of it and melts your face.
That sounds like...
Someone's getting melted.
Someone is gonna get it. Yep.
That sounds just like Jim. Absolutely. Wow, that's a great. That's great to just remember those little tidbits of stories.
Yep.
Sparky knows that thing.
I missed something big. I'm sorry, I missed something big back in the pre third edition era. I just want to discuss real quick. You worked on Ruins of Adventure.
Mm-hmm.
That turned into Pool of Radiance.
Yeah, the same art. Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. So this is like as big as it got. This was like it's turned into a Roblox game, right? So can you just tell us a little bit about like how exciting that was at the time? You know, because it was like the games that was a new genre, right? Wow, computer games.
Huge.
Yeah. I'm sorry I missed this. My apologies. Yeah.
Oh no, because I forget about it all the time. It was, oddly, no, we didn't really appreciate. I'm not sure how many people did at the time, just how big computer games were going to become, or even how popular that one was going to be, right? But I had a really frustrating role to play in that game because what the part that got assigned to me was drawing geomorphic maps of the city that could be, plugged in anywhere. And I was, as originally told, they were going to be like 32 by 32 squares, I think. Each geomorph was 32 by 32. And they needed, I forget how many, 16, 20, some fairly large number. So I I drew these geomorphic city maps, 32 by 32, which is that's a lot of map. and then when it's all done, and then I wrote some other parts of it. I think there's an adventure where you go down a well and there's a whole layer at the bottom of this well. I think I worked on that. I forget what else. But then we get a note back from SSI saying, okay, our memory constraints are a lot tighter than we thought they were going to be. Those 32 by 32 maps, they actually need to be, and I forget what the number was, like 12 by 12 or something.
Minor change.
They were like, we need you to convert all those. And I don't remember what the exact numbers were, but I do remember that they were not divisors of one another. The new number did not divide neatly into the old number, and it was way smaller. So I had to go back in and redraw all those geomorphs, and it was effectively impossible. The things I had done before would not translate to.
It would be easier to start over from have done it, not have done
it
before, so to speak.
It was, all right, I kind of look at that what I did before. So it's kind of like some twisting alleyways. All right, so I need to do something with some twisting alleyways.
Wow.
Right, and so I was, needless to say, I was kind of put out by that, and that left a sour taste in my mouth for a while. I'm very proud of the work we did on that, but at the time, I was.
It was not fun, I guess. Yeah.
No, it was, and of course, it happened at the 12th hour, right?
Sure.
It was all need to be done. Oh, and we need it by Tuesday.
It just brings back so many memories back then. It was like the golden era because they were gold box games, right? You had them all.
Yeah.
And, it was all. You could run them on a Commodore 64, which was really cool back then.
Yeah, I had it on my Amiga back in the day.
Yeah. Just I think some of them were even for the Apple. It was just such a amazing time to actually be able. Wow, you can play these great games on a computer. So I just wanted to, because it came to my attention that you had participated in this undertaking, and Ruins of Adventure was a series of adventures that somehow got converted into Pool of Radiance. Is that what I don't know. I didn't read up on what actually happened, but
well, my recollection is that the computer game was actually the impetus for all of it.
Okay.
That it was as long as the computer game is going to be there, let's do a paper product that covers the same ground essentially. So we did, as I recall, Ruins of Adventure. The paper product was a spin-off of the computer game rather than the other way around.
Okay. Okay. Well, was trend-setting at the time. It was the beginning of a huge era of the gold box. So really,
yeah,
really
I
cool.
wish I had appreciated at the time. Just
yeah.
Well, yeah.
So I'm sorry to jump out there, but out of order. But I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask this question.
Yeah.
Third edition.
Somebody had brought that up to me a while ago. I mean, like years ago, in the mid 2000s, I think. I got an email out of the blue from someone asking me a question about all of that. And at the time, I had completely forgotten that I had even worked on it.
Oh, wow.
I had to go find a copy and read through it and try to refresh my memory on what I had actually contributed to the. I mean, I remembered the part. I remembered the maps in Pool of Radiance. On my deathbed, I will be sitting there about 12 by 12. Right? But,
what tool do you had to use? Was that done digitally, like Paint or something, or what?
No, the tool I had to use was a sheet of graph paper and a pen.
Oh wow! So you had to sit and fill in the
and then just mail those to SSI, and they converted them into a digital format.
That's what. Yeah, I remember we back in we did that a few times when we experimented with computer graphics early on. Yep.
Yeah. And you had some really funny things in there. That was just hysterical. You had those Adiogs molding all the piles of dung or whatever. I won't go into the details, but it was kind of like, whoa, this is kind of cutting edge for its time, which was neat. It was really really some neat stuff, and the systems worked pretty well. To code that all in at the time, the combat and all, and the rings of protection and items of gear worked pretty well. Definitely.
I don't recall if I ever actually played Pool of Radiance. I know I played Dungeon Hack a lot when that one came out. That was the randomly generated 20 level dungeon. You try to fight your way to the bottom of it. But
yeah, what a time! Wow, reminiscing now, which is really cool. So, third edition. 4 years later, they asked, say, please come back, and you moved to Seattle because it was your wife spending more and more time there, and that's why you decided to move to Seattle.
Well, it's a little sadder than that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My wife and I split up at about that time.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So she decided that she was going to move to Seattle to work full time at Wizards of the Coast, and we had 2 kids, right? It's like, well, the idea of like trying to shuttle the kids back and forth, and to me, I was like, well, at this point, most of my friends are in Seattle anyway. So, if rather than, create so much of a headache, I'll just move to Seattle too, because, working, whether I work freelance or what have you, I can do that out there as well as I can here. I didn't want to rattle around in that great big Victorian house all by myself. So,
sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, and we still see each other. We're good friends. It was not a acrimonious split, so I came out to Seattle too, and wound up. I was working for Wizards of the Coast, but was not a Wizards of the Coast employee. I was working for a consulting company called True North Consulting, which worked. True North did work for Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, and in fact, we had. I mean, they were our only 2 clients, to the extent that Wizards actually gave us office space in the Wizards of the Coast building.
Okay.
So, there were an awful lot of people there who did not realize I was not a Wizards of the Coast employee, that I was working for someone else. Okay. That was how I wound up in Seattle.
Did you interact with Paizo a lot, like Eric Mona and James Jacobs and Jason Bowman? Nope, not at all. Okay. All right.
And you brought up third edition. At the end of TSR, so in a lot of 97, the company wasn't publishing much because there was no money to publish, and we were feuding with Random House so much. we needed to, obviously people, we needed something to do. And one of the things that we did, again, since I was still in charge of the AD&D product group at that time, was we did a tremendous amount of brainstorming on, there's going to be a third edition of this game sometime, and let's talk about it. Let's start mapping it out. So we laid a huge amount of the groundwork of third edition at TSR, and after Wizards, finalized the sale, and the decision had already been made that we were not moving to Seattle. One of the last things I did officially in '97, I guess, was I wrote a white paper that took all the notes I had been accumulating from those conversations we had been having at TSR, and wrote a pretty lengthy white paper, basically, this is what we see as needing to be done to the game, and delivered that to Wizards of the Coast. I mean, they paid me for it. Right?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious then, because I loved third edition when it came out, and I still think it's one of the most profound changes in D&D. And one of these mechanics that I was really intrigued by was the feat mechanic. Was that even part of that white paper, or is that something you can even remember or want to discuss?
It was, but I'm sure we didn't call it that. I don't. So there's a what the heck is it called? Balboa Games. If any of you have been around the hobby long enough, you remember in the late '70s there was a huge amount of independent D&D game design going on in California. Right, California was like a real hotbed of D&D fandom, and because of the guys who eventually became Chaosium, I'd say guys and women, and Balboa was one of the companies that came out of that, and they one of the products they put out was a thing called the Complete Wizard, I think. I bought a copy of that when I was in college, and it had a thing in it. It was a new take on the thief class, and it treated the thief kind of like a wizard, in that there was a table set up very much like the wizards or the magic users advancement table, but instead of indicating here's how many spells you get at each of these levels, it said here's how many thiefly skills you get at each of the levels. And then there was this whole big long menu of skills that the thief could get, and many of them built on previous ones, right? It's like to get lockpicking 3, you have to have lockpicking 1 and 2. But it solved the problem that thieves always had, that, at low levels, thieves can try all kinds of things, but they suck at all of them. Right? It's like, why would I ever try to disarm a trap when I know that I only have a 20% chance to succeed and an 80% chance that the trap is just going to go off in my face, right? It solved that problem. And I had been a huge fan of that approach and that system ever since I saw it in the late '70s. I had discussed it at great length with Zeb when we were working on second edition, and we decided at the time it was too big of a departure, but it was always there in the background. And so when it came time to talk about third edition, that was still there, and something we talked about a lot as a different way to approach some of these things. And I mean, third edition was a huge team effort, right? I don't want to claim that any of these ideas had more influence than they had, because there were ideas being kicked around all over the place. A lot of them came from TSR. A lot of them came from the people who were already at Wizards of the Coast, right? Guys like Jonathan Tweet and Peter Adkison. I mean, they're a huge team, very, very talented team behind that. But the idea of feats, we didn't call them feats, but that idea of specific incremental skills that characters would pick up and, you know, accumulate as they gain levels.
The tree.
Yeah. That idea was definitely germinating for many years before.
Well, it's good to know that if that sale had not happened, we probably would have got a third edition anyways.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Wow. So I got a question. If you don't know, it's no problem because I have no idea. So Antiquitous asked about Vecna, and could Steve further explain how Vecna evolved from Jack Vance and the Vecna association with Michael Moorcock's quorum? I don't know.
So I've never really heard of Vecna being associated with Jack Vance before. Maybe.
Okay.
It's an anagram.
I suppose.
That might be. Yeah. That might be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, absolutely, it's, you know, the quorum stories, I think, are
okay.
I don't know if any of you
read
them. If you read the quorum stories, they are, if they were not the direct influence on a lot of the ideas that made it into D&D, then boy, there's a lot of coincidence at work.
Okay.
I mean, the main character of the quorum stories, Quorum, is an elf, and he's, if you've read any Moorcock, there's the idea of the eternal warrior, right? Elric is one incarnation. Quorum is a much earlier incarnation than Elric of this eternal warrior. But very early in the first of the Quorum books, he's captured. There are these barbarian raiders who are running around massacring every elf they can find, and they lop off his hand and they gouge out his eye. Goes on to become this great, avenging hero. But there are a lot. I don't want to spoil the books for people, because I highly recommend, if you're a fan of that era of fantasy, the Quorum
I have a
books
shelf full of
the Quorum
Elric
books
stuff.
and the Elric books are just fantastic.
Never read any Quorum. Now I want
Quorum
to.
is, I mean, the Wild Hunt is a huge part of the second trilogy of Quorum books.
I did not know that either. So
wow. The whole idea of law and chaos is just throughout the Quorum books.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of, if you sit down and read the Quorum books and you've read the Gary's DMG, it's just like, oh, okay. I see what you did there, Gary. Yeah, it's
interesting.
There's no question in my mind. Obviously, I know.
Great question, Alex.
I think Gary had to have read the Quorum books, or certainly, I know most of the players in his games who were contributing ideas as well had read those books. Jim Ward's a huge fan of Moorcock. Everybody. If you're not a fan of Moorcock, you're not playing D&D.
That's awesome. So, by the way, Alyssa Faden says hello.
Oh, hey, Alyssa.
Yes, Alyssa says
hi, Alyssa. Yep. I'm just going to put the link. There's actually on Steam, you can actually get Pool of Radiance. Part of all is a collection of all the other games from SSI. So I'm going to put a link in here, and it's part of a collection. You need to get like the main, and then it's a DLC for the other ones, and it's cheap because like $10 or something. So they have $35 for all of them. So it's so they're actually
have them from GOG.
Good old games.
That might be too. That might be available on GOG too.
Yeah,
so so I'm just going to put links saying that you can actually run them on today's computers too. That's amazing. Yep. Yep.
So at a certain point, you decide to rejoin, or they re-invite you back to Wizards.
Well, as I say, I had moved out to Seattle in 2001, and I don't remember exactly how it all shook out. One of the things I had done during that interim period was I just, the web was really taking off at that point. So I just taught, myself web programming, and I started, you know, putting up my own websites, hobby-related websites, primarily not D&D related. I was doing things with historical miniatures, wargaming primarily, because you know, it was, you could do photography for that.
Yeah.
Right? It was so much, you know, they were so much more visual. Who doesn't want to look at toy soldiers? But the, you know, Wizards of the Coast was kind of, there were some changes to its web team, and I was contacted by the woman who was running the web team at Wizards at that time. They needed someone to do the, what was it? I think it was for the Avalon Hill website at that time. And so again, it was much like the way I, you know, went to work at TSR, just happened to be in the right place at the right time. You know, it was the same thing there. They needed somebody who knew web programming and knew wargaming. Well, there I was. So
yeah, perfect.
That was how I got back into it.
So that 3rd edition era, I know you did Lords of Madness. Is that 3rd or 4th? Anna, I know you have the book there.
That's
That was
third edition.
Yes,
Yep.
that's a big, the big one there.
This one of the awesome books.
Yeah,
Yep.
I know that was one of your highlights in 3rd.
A little more psionics.
Yes, yeah, more in the psionic realm.
Although that was a case where I had I think that was the only project I worked on in 3rd edition that involved writing monster stats.
Oh.
Because after doing that one, I just said, I am never again doing monster stats 3rd edition. This is a nightmare. I mean, there's a lot to love about 3rd edition, but as a designer, monster stats is not one of them.
Yeah.
Some people love that.
Pages, yeah, it's too much.
And as a player, right? I mean, there's a huge amount of information there. But as you know, as the person who has to actually put all that information in place, it was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
But I recall that I wrote a whole what I thought was a very cool background lore for the Mind Flayers and the Githyanki, about their, you know, this ancient, that the war between the Mind Flayers and the Githyanki actually took place far in the future, and you know that.
Remember that, man.
And that when the Githyanki rose up and had this huge rebellion, and it looked like they were going to win, and essentially they were going to obliterate the Mind Flayers, right? It was genocide. They were going to wipe them out to the very last, and there would be no more Mind Flayers. And that the only way the Mind Flayers could find to preserve any vestige of themselves was to, through a combination of science and magic, to hurl themselves backward in time.
Oh, interesting.
To a time before they had enslaved the Githyanki, and re-enslave them, and essentially just repeat their whole history, but knowing that the Githyanki are going to rebel, and this time they can, you know, they can do things to prevent it.
Lords of Madness indeed.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there were large elements of that backstory that Wizards decided was too big a departure, that they did not want to go into it. So a lot of it wound up on the cutting room floor. And I was very sad about that, because I thought it was a, you know, wonderful way. And again, it's all, you know, as I mentioned Clark Ashton Smith before, of all the people who've written, you know, fantasy stories, Smith is far and away my favorite. And his stories are just so, I mean, they're so dark and they are so weird. He was writing weird fantasy, was the term they had for it at the time. And he really went in for the weird. And so I love that stuff. I eat it up. And
awesome.
I was trying to inject some of that in there. And I think it just got maybe a little too weird for what Wizards felt was a mass audience. Unfortunately, that kind of thing all these things go in cycles, right? It's fashion and what's
Yeah.
fashionable. What was fashionable in the 1930s, not so much anymore.
Mm-hmm. But the third edition year was interesting because it was a lot of experimental, a lot of new concept and ideas, and kind of was get battle tested, discarded, or loved. And it was also what they call the D20 glut. So there was the kind of the first really big era of third-party publishing too. So it was the third edition year was, I think, a lot of interesting experimentation that we hopefully have kept the best of in today's times, so to speak.
I know I walked into a big hobby store out here in the Northwest shortly before. I don't recall if 4th edition had been announced publicly at that time or not. I knew it was happening. I don't know. I don't think the public did yet. But I'd gone into a big hobby store and I just sat there looking at the wall. And I mean a wall, like a 20-foot wall of D20 material, right? And of course, only a small part of it is from Wizards of the Coast. So this is all third-party publishing stuff. Yeah. And thinking, and two thoughts were going through my head. One was, all this stuff is going to become obsolete very shortly. And the other thought was, 80% of this is rubbish, right? It's not good. I mean, some of it is brilliant. There are some real gems here, but 80% of this is rubbish.
Necromancer Game is brilliant. That was brilliant stuff. Loved their stuff.
Yeah, there was a lot of great stuff. But boy, there were just, I mean, a lot of it was basically of the same quality that we were seeing in the 70s when everybody with access to a mimeograph machine was putting out D&D variants.
Yeah. It's like the monkeys with typewriters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the end of the 3rd edition, 4th edition comes around, where Paizo goes off and does Pathfinder. Where are you at this point? And are you at WotC, or are you freelancing, or?
I worked for True North Consulting doing website work for Wizards from 2001 until 2004, I think. And then when True North Consulting folded up, Wizards hired me full time to keep doing what I had been doing on the website. And I worked on the web team. So, I mean, I was there all through the 4th edition years.
Lurking.
But I was on the web team as opposed to the RPG team. But I was doing it was all D&D web support primarily. I was mostly actually working on the D&D miniatures website. So all the material that was done for the miniatures on the website. And then eventually I wound up joining the in 4th edition when we had I forget what it was actually called, all the online tools that were done for 4th edition and the magazines, when Dragon and Dungeon were being published electronically.
D&D Insider?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think that was Insider. I was on the Insider team. So helping to publish the magazines and running the miniatures website.
Okay. So 5th edition comes out, and I see, and I guess you started doing a lot of work with Wolfgang at Kobold Press, because you have two major publications back to back. It's a 2-part series. Now they made it into one, but and thank you for doing that, New York GM. That is Horde of the Dragon Queen, and then Rise of Tiamat. And this is you and Wolfgang. So I'm assuming they subbed out Kobold. Yeah.
Yes, Wolf, me, and actually on the second book, my son Alexander was also writing.
Oh, nice. So that's pretty impressive, because I know how popular this series was.
Yeah. I mean, that was again. Anybody who's creative, and I'm sure all of you have had this experience, that you're never really happy with with your work. And it's like I run into so many people who are like, oh, I love this, I think it's wonderful, and then all that's going on in my head is, really, Really? Yep. You like that?
Yeah, but afterwards you always realize what you could have done better. So
yes, exactly.
If you started over again. So,
right.
Yeah.
You think, oh man, if I had that to do over, it would be, I would not make all these mistakes. But the thing with the Tiamat adventures, and I think they turned out pretty well. I think the first one is a little stronger than the second one. But a lot of that has to do with it's just how do you handle this in a satisfying way? And what works for one person may not work for another.
Yeah, and it's also the very first big adventure for 5th edition, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
That was hard. You didn't have any precedent, so to speak. It was a new edition of the game and not much to fall back on.
Not only did we not have a precedent, we didn't even have the rules.
Okay, wow, so it was that early done. Yeah, because I remember it was very early in 5th edition days. Okay.
Yes, the rules were not even cemented. And in fact, like the monster stats we were provided with were not final yet.
Wow.
So as we're trying to put together, encounters, any kind of balanced encounter, there's one in particular that I've mentioned on other podcasts where I think when the characters it's during the big road trip from the south up to the north, and characters come to an inn, and originally they get into there's a nobleman and his party at this inn, and they give the characters a bunch of crap, and a fight can break out. At the time, those nobles were all Slavs. They were all polymorphed Slavs, and which were, in terms of the stats we had been provided, they were a good matchup for the characters at that time. They wound up, and then Slavs changed completely, and so we were told, yeah, you can't use Slavs, do something else. So I was like, I don't know. So I think we just made them like a group of assassins, working off of the stats we had for the NPC assassin at that time. And then when the monster manual comes out, suddenly the assassin is like, 5 challenge levels higher than he was when we had this. So any DM who ran that by the book, who gets the characters into a fight with these assassins, it's going to be a TPK. The assassins are going to mop the floor with them, right? And it's purely because, like I say, the stats that we had were very preliminary. Right? We were working with, if you ever, I'm sure some of you have seen the second Tremors movie.
Yes.
Where the guy shows up in his deuce and a half truck covered in gore, and he's saying, I feel I was denied critical need to know information. And that was kind of how we felt.
Very, very cool.
That's awesome. So you basically did it with the playtest rules or some version of that. So
wow.
Yeah, because I remember those when that was called D&D Next. I think you did during those times. Yeah.
So you basically, I'm assuming, left WotC and then started working freelance, mostly through Kobold, but also I see you have some stuff from Frog God here as well in this 5e era. So you have this one, 5th edition Foes. I found that one. Are you doing it in just 5e? Are these publications, are you doing them in their Sword and Wizardry as well for these?
I've only worked on the 5e versions of them for them. Yeah, they do their own Swords and Wizardry conversion.
Yeah, and
I just did a few more adventures for them last year.
I saw this one, Quest of Doom 4 Awakenings. Is that older?
Yeah, Awakenings. I love that adventure. I've run that a few times at cons. That's my favorite.
Okay.
But I did one of their Christmas themed Orcus adventures. I did of those this last year. Orcus in a Winter Wonderland.
We gave that away during a fantasy mapping show, Anna.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We had on. Oh my gosh, Anna, who do we have on from Frog God? Oh my God, my brain shut off.
Oh, me too. Damn. Now you put me on the spot.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Yeah, one step below Bill Webb. So
yeah, we didn't have Bill Webb. We had
my brain is off, everyone. I apologize.
Yeah. Now I need to be apologize to Mr. Facebook friends, and I will see them at
Zach Glazer. Thank you, Michael.
Zach Glazer.
Thank you, Michael. The audience bailed us out on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, audience.
We had like 38 giveaways, and we had a whole bunch of stuff, and that was one of them. That was really cool. So it's good to know you wrote that one as well. I mean, just some wonderful stuff, you know.
And let me do my product plug, because they have another one coming out sometime soon called Lake of Dust. That I also wrote.
Is it in Kickstarter, or is it going right to publication?
I don't know. I think probably right to publication, because it's only like a 32-page adventure.
Okay, Lake of Dust. Very cool. Can't wait to see that. Also, I think this is Kobold Press, Scarlet Citadel, Dungeons and Secrets.
Yes.
Yeah, that looks pretty cool.
That's an amazing adventure path with so many maps and stuff. Yeah.
Stephen, can you tell us a little bit about it?
So that one happened in it was Wolf's idea to do this, because it's his world, right? And he kind of keeps an eye on it. But it's a 6-level dungeon. There are a couple of expansion levels that came about because of the Kickstarter, right? They were add-on bonuses. But it's primarily a 6-level dungeon beneath this ruined citadel. And each level has its own thing going on. Each level is very different from all the others. And it has, but the way we did it, this was it was a process that came out of when I was working on Tomb of Annihilation for Wizards of the Coast. One of the other designers, now I forget his name, I apologize, but he's the guy who wrote the final portion of the adventure. He wrote the big tomb part of it. He drew all the maps. So I had no input on the maps for the areas that I was writing about. And I enjoyed that process so much, right? The reason why is because I've talked about this a lot on other podcasts too. When you're doing anything creative like this, you fall into patterns, right? There are certain ideas that I just love. And if nobody puts a check on me, I will put those ideas in everything I do. And there are a ton of other ideas that are just crowded out. Those ideas will never occur to me if I'm left to my own devices. So when somebody else draws the map and that's put in front of me, it's like, now I have to make someone else's ideas on this map. I need to flesh those out. And I find that as a creative process, it's really a great spur to thinking outside your normal routine, your normal creative pathways, right? So I had recommended that to Wolf. I don't recall if I had recommended it or I merely told him about the experience I'd had working on Tomb of Annihilation and how refreshing I found it. And so, we decided, well, let's do Scarlet Citadel that way. We brought in the mapper. Wolf had made kind of a wish list of these are things I would like to see in the dungeon. And then I went through and fleshed it out and said, here are ways I think those can work. Here are ways, I think they should maybe be rearranged like this. Let's add this to it. Anyway, we came up with an outline. That outline was given to the mapper, and then it was just, now you create a map where those things can happen, right? And, don't limit yourself to this, but those things can happen. And so then we got the maps back, and then I got to sit down and actually figure out, okay, this obviously goes there. this over here, I don't have any idea what that is. So I do whatever we want there.
Yeah.
Right. But it was, like I say, it led to, I had, Wolf and I both had a lot of input into how the maps were created. But then when it came to actually writing how this is all going to work, there were just all these little kicks, right? Sending you, oh, right. I would not have done it that way, but it's very cool. I like it. And it triggers a different thought in my head. Let's go that direction instead.
Yeah.
Right?
Now you explain to me why I like Greyhawk so much, because instead of, people always ask, why do you play and do all that stuff with Greyhawk? Why don't you come up with your own setting? And you gave me the perfect example. It's much more fun to kind of build on someone else's basic ideas and to analyze them, pick them apart, and kind of, oh, I want to, like, even if you're given lemons, you make lemonade out of it. And I love that exercise and to bring on top of it.
Yep.
It's a lot of fun.
So there was, many years ago, some of you might remember, there was a game called Sky Realms of Jerome. Wonderful, wonderful game. Just a fantastically deep setting, but very odd. I
remember they had ads in Dragon with some figure with some.
I used to love the art on those ads.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much the guy who created it was Andrew Leaker. It was a really creative guy, very smart guy. The only time I ever got to talk to him was at Gen Con, but we would always seek each other out at Gen Con and sit and have a long conversation about various things, because he was just a fascinating guy. I've kind of lost track of him. I know he was working in computer games for a while, but one of the things in that game was he had a random encounter generator. And I had tried it out one night and I came up with a comment. I had always thought those kinds of things were stupid. And I was kind of like, I can't believe Andrew, thinks this is a good idea, because he's a really smart guy. And so I tried it out and I came up with a combination that I just thought was dumb. It was like, all right, this just confirms all my preconceived biases about this approach. And, but the next day at TSR, I was discussing that with John Pickens, and I was basically just venting, right, to John about it. And John said, his response to me was, if it doesn't make sense, then you haven't thought about it enough. And again, I was like, and I wandered away. But that kept kind of eating at my mind, right? And it's one of those great Zen kind of things, right? If it doesn't make sense, you haven't thought about it enough, right? Well, if that statement doesn't make sense, you haven't thought about it enough. And I thought about it more and more and more. And eventually I went back and I looked at what I had rolled up off of Andrew's encounter tables, and I thought about it, and suddenly this light bulb went off in my head. And I was like, that's actually a brilliant encounter. And I never would have come up with that on my own. It was the fact of picking these things randomly that seemed to have no relationship to each other, and then forcing myself to find the relationship. That's the only way I ever would have arrived at this encounter.
Mad Libs.
Yeah, and I've been a fan of that kind of approach to things ever since. And the mapping thing plays right into that, right? It leads you down creative pathways you never would have taken on your own.
It's a good, and it opens up your mind to other ideas too, learning from that experience. So I got two more quickies here. So you got to collaborate with Ed Greenwood. Then it looks like in 5th edition here, Murder in Baldur's Gate. This.
Well, not really.
Okay.
Ed's a great guy. I would love to collaborate with Ed at some point, but I think Ed's name is on that product primarily because because Baldur's Gate is his.
Okay.
Although, actually, no, I take that back. I have a copy of that on a shelf. Actually, I think Ed did write it. Ed did actually write part of that. Think about it. But yeah, we wrote the adventure. Again, my son Alexander and I wrote the adventure. But there's another portion of the books that Ed did write. So I'm sorry, Ed did contribute directly to that product.
Cool.
So I'll ask this. Speaking of collaboration, so down the road, do you still play? You still?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Ed plays in a Geralt game with myself, IDM with Anna, with Eric Mengi, with Eric Boyd, at Tony Winslow Brill. It's called 2 Drink Minimum. We always look for some special guests every couple of months. You want to jump in with a game with Ed? You're more than welcome to. A couple of months down the road, you want to do it?
Yeah. When do you play?
We play on a Saturday night usually. Once it's every like 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I have 2 games that go on. I run a D&D game on Monday nights, and I'm in a Call of Cthulhu group that generally plays on Saturday evenings, but irregularly.
Okay.
Right? Well, and we're sort of between. We just wrapped up Masks of Nyarlathotep a short time ago, and no one has stepped up yet and volunteered to run something else. So, for at least a little while, my Saturday evenings are kind of free.
Well, cool. Down the road, we'll see when we can fit you in on a special game, and if you're free, that'd be wonderful. So that's why you and Alyssa get along so well, right? Because Alyssa loves Call of Cthulhu as well. It's her favorite.
Well, I mean, we get along because we're both just very smart, charming people.
Well, that's good to hear. That, I saw this that you've done this, and that's really cool. Some Forgotten Realms content, and then let's just go lastly a full circle here. So, how cool was it to work on a Greyhawk product again all those years?
You worked on the first
Ghost
one,
on Saltmarsh,
and the last one too. That's amazing.
I mean, Saltmarsh was a lot of fun. I was very happy when Wolf invited me to join in on that.
Okay.
In fact, I think I may have pulled my Don Turnbull pixie wings out of the file and actually hung them up on my
nice.
Oh wow, that's amazing. Yep.
There was actually kind of an amusing story that came out of that too. One of the adventures I worked on was written by Richard Pett.
Okay.
He's done a lot of work for Necromancer. And we had asked at the beginning of the project, we talked to the people at Wizards, like, how heavy a hand do you want here, right? Do you want us to, should we really try to preserve the author's voice, or do you want things kind of homogenized, right? And they said, no, preserve the author's voice as much as possible. And then I worked on this, one of Richard's adventures, and everything got sent off to Wizards, and we got some feedback back from them. And one of the notes was, this particular adventure, the language is kind of florid. And I said, it is a Richard Pett adventure. We could change it, but then it really wouldn't be a Richard Pett adventure anymore. And they were like, okay, we understand.
Wow.
Yeah. You should have told them the Shakespearean story.
Yes, I did tell Wolf that story.
Okay. Yep.
Any tidbit that you kind of snuck into this book?
Any, little Easter eggs?
Yeah, something.
I don't think so. Not too much. There was an adventure, one of Mike Merle's adventures about it, where you have to kind of run a quick raid onto a ship that's
it's from the Dungeon magazine, that adventure. Yeah.
There was
Tamaro's Fate. Tamaro's Fate was, I think it was.
I think it gets attacked by a sea monster at the end. And the way I handled that was very much the way I like to handle things like that. It was not at all what Wizards was expecting, I think, when they got it back, in terms of, because it's very abstract, right? It's not like, here's the monster and the monster takes a turn and this is how it behaves. It was more like, no, this is just giant tentacles are going to randomly come smashing through the ship, right? The sea monster is more a force of nature than a creature to be battled, right? You have no chance to kill this thing. It's going to tear the ship apart and it's maybe going to tear some characters apart with it. But if your idea is that we're going to stand here and fight it, that's just, you know,
have at it.
This is engineered in such a way that that is not going to work.
That's nice.
So,
awesome. Anna, Mike, questions? Steve, the 2 hours have like flown by. You know, look at that.
I was
I
going to
mean,
say,
crazy.
yeah.
I knew what a great
just,
discussion this would be. I mean,
I just enjoyed every minute. This is so wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we don't want to keep you too long here, but we wanted to.
Will you be at GaryCon next year?
There you go.
I hope so. I will be at North Texas in the beginning of June. I plan to be at Gamehole Con, and I will try to get back to GaryCon. GaryCon works out. GaryCon and Gamehole Con both work out nicely for me because I still have a lot of family in Iowa, so I can combine those conventions with a trip back to visit family.
Yeah.
So, what can, if someone wanted to contact you at your company Howling Tower Games, what would they look to you for?
You mean
writing, like you know, say someone projects,
writing, editing. Okay. I focus more on writing than editing these days.
Okay.
Because it's more, tends to be, you know, it's a little more interesting, a little more fulfilling. I'm kind of at a stage where I feel like I can pick and choose my projects and only focus on the ones that will actually interest me as opposed to just things to pay the bills. Right now, I'm actually pretty busy on a completely unrelated thing. I got involved with a nonprofit operation that provides services to children and families that are dealing with fetal alcohol syndrome. And they needed a clinical manual, and it's not really my wheelhouse, but it's technical writing, which is essentially what game writing is, and they needed some help, and so I decided to get involved with that, and it's been, you know, unfortunately, it's like a lot of things, it's moving more slowly than anyone thought it would, because it's not really, putting together manuals is not what they do, and so it's been a learning process, but it's fascinating stuff. But I can't take on too much more work until we get that wrapped up.
And Lake of Dust is sometime this year, you think, from Frog God?
Yeah. I've been talking to Anthony Pryor, is the product manager on that, and I've sent him a revision at the beginning of the month, and I think it's probably going to come out sometime here in the next month or two. I think he said it was going to press at the end of this month. So should be by Gamehole Con anyway, I would expect it to be available.
Fantastic. Anything else you'd like to shout out? Seems that you're very, very generous and kind of you coming on here. And I'm telling you, we have 130 people watching right now that are very interested. We've got a lot of questions running. A lot of questions running through. A lot of people saying, "Oh, I love the Psionics handbook," and you know, Ghost of Saltmarsh was inspiring. There's a lot of great discussion in chat going on now. So just wanted to say thank you so very much. Yeah.
No, I was happy to be here.
Thank you for the time.
Yeah.
I'd love to get in a game, just like Mike did. I'd love to get in a game with you at GaryCon next year. That would be wonderful. You said, all right, so you said for North Texas, any others? Those are the two you usually attend, the old school ones? For the
North
most part?
Texas, Gamehole, and
Gamehole as well. Okay. I don't know. You going to Gamehole?
I was randomly assigned to him, Jay.
Real? For the tournament. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay. Annie, you going to Gamehole this year?
Before I would say no, but since I will cancel my D&D Newcastle thingy, that will, unfortunately, I have to cancel that one for this year. Well, due to it's going to take too much time, and I don't have it, so to speak, to take a month off. for that, unfortunately. But so I might have chance to go over the weekend for Game Hall Con. I haven't made any convention things more than I will go to PAX Unplugged will be the thing to try and do when that comes. Anything between then and now, we'll see. Yeah.
I've never been to Game Hall. Maybe.
Game Hall is a great convention. There's no doubt about it. It's a great convention. So yeah.
Yeah, Game Hall is doing virtual events this year, Lomas as well. A lot of them are. Just remember, we do before Game Hall, we have Virtual GrowdCon, Steve, that I created 3 years ago. This will be the third time. It's first week in October. It's going really well. Always a fun time with that too. Maybe a Creators of D&D show or something. Troy says that's a possibility. Troy, I mean, we there's a lot of options out there. Everyone is very kind and giving us their time, which has always been wonderful. So. Stephen, anything else you'd like to shout out or mention or discuss? I mean, it's been 5 decades of accomplishments. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. I had at GaryCon there was an event at the Lake Geneva Museum where they were running a D&D game, and I went over. I didn't get to play. Unfortunately, I got there late and I was helping schlep some things around, but. I ran into Harry Quinn and his wife Terry were there. Terry was playing in the game, and Harry was one of the illustrators at TSR in early years, in the early 80s. And so Harry and I were just standing around chatting, and we were saying it's kind of cool. Nice. I mean, in a very small way, right? I mean, we contributed to something that really has had an outsized effect on the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
A lot of people love this game and this hobby, so it's nice to be. One of the first times I went to the North Texas Con, I was visiting with my parents. My mom was still alive at that time, and she was asking me, "What do you do at these conventions? At a convention like that?" I said, I play games and sign autographs. And she said, "People want your autograph?" I'm very well known in a very small area.
I'm going to have a stack of things for you to sign next year, Steve.
You got to bring it all. Yeah. Wow. That is, it's amazing though. The community is very tight, and so, everyone, I mean, it's just the names are out there, and everyone knows who Jim Ward is, but there's so many other people. Like, some people walk right by Zeb Cook and wouldn't know it's Zeb Cook, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, which is an amazing thing. Or Roger Moore, who showed up at GaryCon this year too.
Yeah, I was sorry I missed him. I haven't seen Roger for years, and I only heard after the fact that he had been.
Yeah, it was great talking to. And hopefully he will be
on here soon.
A lot of stuff in coming back to the community, to the hobby.
So let's do some quickie shout outs, get the giveaway going, and then we'll call it a night there. So, Mike, Anna, anything going on?
There's tons and tons going on. I'm not going to have a long rant. I'll save that for Wednesday when I have way more to do. But there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. But I'll save that for Wednesday. Yeah.
Awesome.
And just thank so many people for helping me out, being my Patreon members. So I just have to thank them again. There's a ton of stuff in the making, and it will start paying off soon. Yeah.
Let's hope.
Yep.
Yes.
And I don't have a ton of stuff to talk about like Anna, but I will see y'all on Wednesday, which is my normal stream night. I'm only here because of Steve.
Yes, Legends of Lore. Mike is here which is great, because without the connection for Mike, Stephen, we wouldn't have you on here tonight. And Mike made the initial, and like I said, thank you so very much for hopping on. I'm gonna hit a wrong button. Which one is it? I always forget it's 13 or 14. So Wednesday night we have on Legends and Lore, Lakes and Waterways of Greyhawk. That'll be the next topic. We'll have that on our Legends and Lore show, 8 p.m. Wednesday. Thursday, I have a new adventure. I'm doing Stephen, I'm doing my remake of the Doom Grinder, which I hate. So, okay, just so you know. That,
you have the series of adventures you hate. You're going to.
I hate the Doom Grinder module. Yes, it is almost as much as something else, which everyone knows in chat what it is. So something from Return to Temple of Mental Evil drives me crazy. So, adventure number 954, the adventure group Iron Fury, Importance of Great Apocalypse, Part 4, out in the Cairn Hills. So we start a new game, and then next, I'm testing a new show idea here on Gabbin next Sunday. Lord Gazuma's D&D Trivia Challenge. I kind of stole it from Mizkif, who has Schooled. You know that game? He does, and it's really fun. And so I have Mandy, Bashman, Darling Creepshow, and the ever mysterious Tim. They'll be vying for prizes. There'll be questions about rules, editions, social media, and Twitch, all in some people's wheelhouses, some others not. It'll be fun. We'll have a blast. And plus, they'll be playing for prizes from the audience as well. So it'll be a good time. That's this time next. Yeah, you like that idea? I come up with a once in a good blue moon there, Eat to Surf. Yep, once in a blue moon. Big games coming up the 21st. Ed Greenwood's back in 2 drink minimum with special guest. Alyssa Faden's a special guest this time, along with the regular crew. And the adventure is No Good Deed, ... You can fill in the blanks after that. Isn't it pretty cool, Stephen? I got Ed playing in my Greyhawk game. He's on. Ed and Eric Boyd, both two, and Ed's fantastic in the game, and that's live stream Saturday, May 21st, 6 p.m. And then way out, the next big one would be the Slav Squad, the all-female cast, plus Josh, Saturday, June 11th, another special event. So we got that all going, and let's do the giveaways real quick. Last call. I'm going to give 2 sets, and thank you for that follow. Temple Tower and Tomb, Stephen's book adventure with the Treasures of Greyhawk thrown in on both. All right, which is a great publication, the 2nd edition era. If you edited this, I give you kudos because there's so many authors, so many great stories in this book during the 2nd edition era. It's a wonderful book. It's like a hidden gem. It's for Greyhawk. So definitely. All right, here we go. Ready? Closing this out, and we'll raid into someone, and we'll call it an evening here. Give me 10 seconds here, because I always hit a wrong button. And we're closing out the giveaways. Here come the winners. If you're overseas, I'm going to gift certificate you so you can get them from Drive Through RPG yourself. Pat66, I saw you on. Grat, Pat. I think I have your address. As long as Pat's on to claim, because you got to be here. Unless you're a tier 2 subscriber or up. Pat's on. I see Pat in chat. Yep, you gotcha. Congrats, Pat. 2nd winner. Death OK Greyhawk. Yeah. What a name. Wow. Death OK Greyhawk is on. So just tell if I don't have your name and address, please. I don't think I do. Please whisper it to me in chat here. Yes. Someone link it, please. Thank you, Troy. We got 2 hours left of William Henry Dvorak's Raven's Rook Kickstarter. Please check it out. I'm sorry, I completely forgot, Troy. Yes, please link that. How much time is left? An hour and a half? It's got 108 minutes to go, 2 hours. It's up to 45.80. So the next Kickstarter goal, I think, is $5,000. They made their goal of 3,000. Raven's Rook, which is Rook Roost and Greyhawk, sanitized. That'll be a really cool book for Will. Please check that out.
Can't be much left of that seed if you sanitize it.
So yes, Will's done a great job on that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Tonight's Darling's turn to be raided into on a Sunday night. That's what we'll raid into. See you all Wednesday. Stephen, thank you so very much. I hope you had a good time.
I did. I had a wonderful time. Thank you for inviting me.
The audience loved the story.
I'm glad you accidentally got assigned to my group at GaryCon, so we got to.
Hopefully, I can redeem myself next year.
Yes. And note, there's a really Stephen, whoever you're talking to, there's a vibrant Greyhawk community that's growing virtually. Twitch streamers, we have a whole bunch. We have it's coming back. So we're trying to get the attention of the powers that be. Something's going on now. We'll see. There's a proposal out there, and that's all I'll say. So hopefully something will happen. You never know. It sounds like you got a lot through, Stephen. Like, this is, we don't want to change any of this. It sounds like they approved stuff, which is good to know. You were good at doing that for like Ghost of Saltmarsh. That's really good to know that you had that. Maybe we'll have a shot. You never know here. So everyone have a great night. We'll see you Wednesday night, and everyone stick around and say hello to Darling and their game, and we'll see Darling on the show next Sunday night for the game show. I'm gonna hit the wrong button. I always do. Oh, maybe not. Thank you. All right, let me set the raid up, and then we'll call it a night here. 10 seconds. Raiding into another channel. So Steve, we had about 125, 130 people on us the whole time.
Wow.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, very, very nice. People really appreciate your time and love hearing the stories.
Yeah.
Yep. 114 rated in Monster Raid. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. See you Wednesday. Have a good the rest of your weekend. Happy Mother's Day. Nice. Just make sure it worked.
Yep, it worked.
All right, good.